All right, let's continue looking at books about Glen Canyon and Lake Powell and related topics. Because that's just such a universal book category that everyone has. Everyone has a Lake Powell Glen Canyon section in their home. You have fiction, nonfiction, and then, usually Lake Powell Glen Canyon, or like a poetry section also. So that's why I knew, I should do a bunch of videos on this subject because it won't alienate the small listener viewer base I've already gotten. But honestly, to see eternity in a grain of sand, to quote William Blake, that's the whole deal, fractals all the way down and all the way out, patterns within patterns within patterns within patterns, also forward and backward in time. Anyway, Lake Powell Glen Canyon. I happen to have a lot of books on the topic. This will be the third video on the subject. Here's the rest. I barely looked at only that small chunk over on the left there. Then I have some maps and things I should get out. I don't know. I wonder if it's a topic anyone cares about. It doesn't seem to galvanize environmental movements too much, though there is always like the Film Mead First movement, and I don't know. I remember more outcry, in the early 2000s. Because Lake Powell was created by the damming of Glen Canyon. Sorry, I'm going to have to repeat stuff in every one of these videos because you never know if someone's just clicking on the one. It's a controversial reservoir, and long ago I canoed around the circumference over 6.5 months. It's a 2,000-mile circumference, longer than the West Coast. So I have bragging rights or whatever for that. One other person kind of did that same trip, but didn't complete it because of so many catastrophes. I became phone friends with him later on. His name was Colin Warren. He did it in the 70s and wrote a book based from his trip. Though he doesn't really talk about his trip, which is really a disappointment to me. But I've talked to him on the phone many times, and he was a super interesting guy. I mean, he had a sail on his canoe also. I didn't. But he spent more time out there than I did, but didn't go all the way around it. It's an idiosyncratic goal, and I didn't get the idea from him, so we kind of came to it independently. I got these two amusingly similarly titled books, The Lake Powell's Boater's Guide and The Boater's Guide to Lake Powell, on the same day. I had the craziest little chapter stuck in this canyon on these high cliffs with a group of people that was all just pushed there by this giant, crazy marina-destroying storm that hit the lake. And my friend's boat, my new friend's boat, these two people, Jack and Jill, that was literally their names. Their boat got sunk and they were stranded there. A kayaker blew over, and then I paddled up on my trip around the lake. And the four of us, I think it was just the four of us, we were stuck there, and it was a wild adventure. It was like a week. We couldn't get it. I mean, it was days. And they, Jack had a hilariously bad attitude about it all. He was like, we're never coming back here. And he gave me one of these guidebooks with disgust. And then the kayaker, I forget that guy's name, but he was cool. Jim, I think. Jack, Jill, and Jim. Is that possible? Crazy. But I love having oh yeah, look, you can see how it looks in map form. I mean, it's crazy looking because it's all flooded canyon land. I thought it would be like a circle when I started the trip. I'm like, it's probably like 1,000 miles around in a circle. Oh, yeah, this has a canyon by canyon guide. It has 98 canyons that are flooded around the main channels of the Colorado, San Juan, Escalante, and Dirty Double rivers. This guy's guidebooks are essential for the Colorado Plateau. Michael Kelsey. He's got a bunch of them. I've got a couple at least. Yeah, guidebooks, It's crazy to think about the different kinds of books, and I don't know. They exist in really different ways and spaces. Like, no one would ever compare like a guidebook to a great novel or something like that. But I don't know. I've gotten a lot out of certain guidebooks. They've transformed places and so on. These are both great. This one was really helpful to me working on that book, and then the later chapter, which is like a 200+ page chapter in book one of my book that I've been working on for 15 years. This has been a big help for that book and for that Lake Powell chapter and for a bunch of chapters. Also, Utah place names. I love a place names guide. I'm such a fan. If you don't know the format, it's, you know, you can look up the name of any place in a state or a region or an area. There's one for the Colorado River I've always wanted to get. I think it's 2-volume. Circleville Canyon, Garfield County, originates along the Sevier River, 14 miles north of Panguitch, where the river cuts through the mountains. It ends 3 miles southwest of Circleville and received its name from the valley. Huh. Yeah, I love a book like this. This one was very helpful to me. I like this one a lot. Good book. Awesome. And it's got obscure stuff, like Backbone is in here. I got picked up by this guy hitchhiking one time. His name was Trace Joseph. He was this cool, I thought he was an indigenous man, but he told me a wild story. He said that his dad was Alex Joseph, who was this famous homesteader who got into a hostage standoff situation with the FBI. And I've been to Backbone. It's just some scrapings by the road now, but Backbone, Kane County, is off US 89, 15 miles west of Big Water, formerly Glen Canyon City. Alex Joseph, a polygamist cult leader, and his followers named and temporarily occupied Backbone in the late 1975 and early 1976 before moving to Glen Canyon City, which they renamed Big Water. Yeah, super fascinating story. And Alex Joseph's son picked me up in his truck. It was super cool. Gave me a ride across Glen Canyon Dam. The steel arch bridge next to it. When I had reached the southern end of that trip, I took a little break. Just not like, you know, I just hid my canoe on a beach and with a note on it. I hitchhiked to Flagstaff to go see a friend of mine from college, Laura, and that was a whole other adventure. Met some amazing people. Met this guy who invited me to stay in his cabin anytime I wanted in northern Idaho, and man, the relationships we neglect, you know. I should have been writing that guy 2 letters a year. Don't forget, you said I could stay in your cabin in Idaho. Hey, what's up? Anyway, when I was hitchhiking back, that's when Trace Joseph picked me up. And I later went and visited with him and lots of other people in Big Water that were connected with this story. Many of the former wives of Alex Joseph were there. Trace showed me this crazy trunk that was just full of obscure polygamist mimeographs and like zines, basically, from within this movement. They had their own church called the Church of Jesus Christ in Solemn Assembly. They did baptisms for the dead, a Mormon ritual in Lake Powell. But I love me a place names book. Yes! Here I've got the Arizonas too in this section. I really like Arizonas. This is a cool one. This is a facsimile of a classic edition, it says, which means that it has a lot of information from closer to the times of some of these places that are now gone and just names in this book. But what I love about this book, and what I think I would copy if I were to ever do a place names book for an area, is that it's by county. So each county is kind of like an antilinear, modular story of a place. You know, if you like your stories out of order, Pulp Fiction style, you know, you just read one of these chapters. And if it's for a county you know, like I read all of the Graham County chapter in this book, and it's like a great story of a county. It's like an area that I know really well and that my ancestors founded some towns in. And it's crazy. One of my ancestors built the first version of the college that I just happened to attend in Arizona. I'm like, it's all too neat sometimes. I was writing this stuff. We're going to look up sometime and see somebody reading us. I mean, if all reality is a construction of consciousness, which we can't ever tell that it's not, then why couldn't you imagine new consciousnesses into it? Is that what religious figures are? That's kind of like American Gods a little bit. But it's so cool to read. I love the county by county thing. Oh, and it's got, this is a well put together book. Each county begins with like a beautiful image. That's so good. Come on, that's how you do a book, people. You don't phone it in. You think about design and layout and everything. Of course you think about font. This is a fine font. Yeah, I have you know what? I'm going to bring some other place names related things over here. Maybe I could have done a video on place names guides. I'll do that sometimes. Now I'll just talk about them in a cursory manner. Here I've got, this was the first New Mexico place names book that I know of. If there was an earlier, it's probably cited in this one. But this is great. It's old. T.M. Pierce. It's from University of New Mexico Press. They got some great stuff going. 1965. Of course, it's a beautiful book. I like it. Simple. The colors are like hearing binaural beats for my brain. Something's clicking up there. New Mexico. County by county. Maybe this one's arranged by county. I don't think it is. But by county is the way to go. I love that. I think that's great. That's where I live, Bernalillo County. Setting of Better Call Saul. They really put a lot of Bernalillo County history into Better Call Saul. It's kind of funny. They have one part where Saul is standing in front of a board at like a sheriff's office that has all this Bernalillo County history on it. The Bernals were a family that came here with Oñate in 1605 and founded the community of Bernalillo. Willie Cather writes about the town of Bernalillo in Death Comes for the Archbishop. Claims they make a fine plum brandy, but I can't find any other record of that anywhere. I think sometimes she just made up details that she thought sounded good. Bernalillo County used to contain Sandoval County also, and that's since split off. So now the town of Bernalillo is in Sandoval County. That's kind of funny. I mean, that's just great. But I love a good place names guide. But this one has been supplanted by a superior place names guide, and it is my favorite place names guide. Place Names in New Mexico by Bob Julian, who I've since become friends with. He's just awesome. He's a cool guy. And I got this at a gift shop at El Morro. El Morro is this amazing place you got to go if you're ever in New Mexico. It's this ancient rock that's covered in inscriptions from every chapter of history, basically, and tons of indigenous rock art all around it. And it's just this like rock out in the plains, out in the middle of nowhere. And it's a family favorite place. I went there recently with a summer camp I worked at, and still blows me away. It's really like an important place in our family too. My sister Leanne was really moved by it and wrote about it when she was alive, and it was talked about at her funeral. And like how she made a trip out there with our little niece Kindred and Kindred's parents, my brother Rob and his wife Krista. We're sitting at a picnic table at El Morro with Inside of the Rocks, and Kindred was like 2, and she was just, everything was beautiful to her and amazing, and she kept picking up dirt and going, this. And Leanne was so moved by that, and it had so many problems with depression and so on, that it was just, anyway, when that story got told at the funeral, everybody was just losing it. I don't know why it was so moving, but it totally, I get it. No idea. Anyway, this is the Digressions channel, digressions.com. You know, I don't know. I hope you all will forgive me a little bit with the digressions once in a while, because, and maybe just let it underscore the point that if you have a good book collection that's personal and that means a lot to you, it's like very intertwined with your life, you know? Anyway, and that's like a goal, you know, to have a life with a book collection that is like, you know, I don't know, mirrors and lifts up and is connected to your life and so on. Like I get like pleasure out of my book collection. I'm happy to see it. I love looking up and seeing these things. And I think to myself, if an earthquake were to happen, I would just let them crush me, take me out. I've been waiting for this. Anyway, I got this book and it blew me away. And from like almost the first day that I had it, I thought, I want to do a piece of writing with that. But I thought it was going to be like a novel. I was like, what a great form, you know, what a great way to tell a modular story. To me, this is nonfiction avant-garde poetry. You can just read this. It's amazing. I travel around with New Mexico and I mark it up. Look, he endorsed this to me a long time ago. It's like to Mike Smith, fellow Sandias author. But I've had it so long and taken it on so many trips, it's all worn out. This is a great book for a road trip across New Mexico. Sorry, this is a digression from Lake Powell, but let's see what's one in here. Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, settlement, county seat on the Rio Grande, west of the Sandia Mountains on the AT&SF Railroad at the junction of I-25 and I-40. Post office 1851 to 1882, mail to New Albuquerque 1882 to present. A long and complex history lies behind the name of New Mexico's largest city, a history that in many ways reflects that of the state itself. The area now occupied by Albuquerque certainly was settled and named by Native Americans before Coronado's arrival in 1540, but their names, like so many prehistoric names, have been lost. Except Tigwe. I think it should be changed back to Tigwe. We can say since 1200. Oldest continually inhabited urban environment in America. Urban settlement. Spanish settlers replaced the Indians, and when the Spanish governor of New Mexico, Don Francisco Cuervo y Valdez, early in 1706, sent Juan Ulibarri to the area to determine its suitability for settlement, Ulibarri reported that it was a very good place for a new villa. At the time of Ulibarri's visit, the locality was called Bosque Grande de Doña Luisa, Estancia de Doña Luisa de Trujillo, San Francisco, Xavier del Bosque Grande, and more commonly simply Bosque Grande, big forest thicket. Huh. That's crazy. That makes the Bosque, the cottonwood forest through the middle of downtown, the original old town. Governor Cuervo E. Valdez accepted Ulibarri's report and soon thereafter authorized the founding of New Mexico's third via after Santa Fe and Santa Cruz. He named it San Francisco de Albuquerque in honor. They really wanted to honor that guy. In honor of Don Francisco Fernandez de la Cueva Enriquez, Duke of Albuquerque. My friends Ian and Danny went and visited the old Albuquerque in Spain and took a ton of pictures. Looks really cool. 34th Viceroy of New Spain, then resident in Mexico City, Don Francisco Fernandez was the second Duke titled Albuquerque to serve as Viceroy of New Spain and was the 10th in succession from the first Duke of Albuquerque. I didn't realize this was going to be so long, sorry. Don Beltran de la Cueva, who received the dukedom in 1464 from King Enrique IV. What? It's crazy, I don't have all these details in my head already. The city for which the dukedom was named once was encompassed by Portugal, but it is now within the province of Badajoz, Spain, about 10 miles east of the Portuguese border. The dukedom of Albuquerque still exists, and occasionally the current duke visits the New Mexico City. The name Albuquerque most likely developed from one of several Spanish forms of the Latin albus quercus, white oak. The trunk of the cork oak is white after the outer layer has been exposed. The seal of the Spanish city of Albuquerque bears the design of an oak. It is also remotely possible, however, that the name is Arabic in origin as the Spanish city is in a region ruled for centuries by the Moors, and the al prefix, the definitive article in Arabic, is extremely common in Arabic. Names of all kinds, including place names. Indeed, many Hispanic names in New Mexico have an Arabic etymology. Alcalde from Arabic alcadi, the judge, and alkali from alkali, the ashes of saltwort. Assuming an Arabic origin for Albuquerque, the most likely etymology would be Albercook, the plum. That's crazy because University Boulevard used to be Plum Street. Plum Street and the Plum. That's funny. Well, plum can sometimes mean the choice thing, right? I mean, it is the fertile valley in between mountains. Okay, and it keeps going. I didn't realize this was like a page long. 2 pages long. Okay, I won't do that to you. But I find it interesting, and I will probably reread that later. Anyway, place names guides, pretty cool. Check this out. So this is probably my most prestigious publication ever. I was in this issue of Tin House, an essay of mine. But they didn't use the name I wanted them to use, which was Mike Smith of Albuquerque. They're like, it's too weird. They just wouldn't do it, so they published it as Mike Smith. And there's another Mike Smith who writes creative nonfiction, and we were both cited as notable in that year's Best American Essays collection. And I thought that was very confusing and lame, and I was kind of resented Tin House for not letting me use the name I wanted to use after that. And I was so disgusted, I started using Michael Farrell Smith as my name instead, which is just my name. But I thought Mike Smith of Albuquerque was cool. It was like the opposite of a pen name in that it was more specific. And I was amused by that and thought it was good for nonfiction where you got to take responsibility for your writing. It kind of had that like old Spanish ring a little bit, you know, like Day, Mike Smith of Albuquerque. They refused. They outright refused. Anyway, at least they published my gosh darn essay. And working with this editor was really great. His name was Rob Spillman, and he was incredible. He really taught me like techniques that I still use to this day in editing. He's like, you got to cut this many words from it. And I'm like, that's impossible. This thing is already lean. And he's like, yeah, just do it by pruning throughout. And unbelievably, I hadn't really internalized that pruning idea before that. I think that really like got me going on that. Like, oh yeah, you really can do it. And just cleaning it up. But you know, I feel like I've worked with more bad editors than good editors. Sorry, editors. You know, here's our style on your style. But anyway, yeah, I talked to like, anyway, it was cool. And I hate that they use stock photos for my story. My essay, because I was like, I could have given you better photos. You know, they'd use the most generic. Anyway, you'll see. Yeah, Tony Hoagland was in here too, and he did an event at Bookworks where I worked after this, and he was so like praising of this thing I wrote. He read it. He didn't read it there when I was with him. He read it and then emailed the store or messaged the booker for the store, a woman named Amanda, who's now in city government. Huh. I wrote an essay about the time toward the end of my first marriage that takes the form of a place names guide. Place names of 501 Filomeno. I changed the street name at the time because my ex-wife and kids still lived on the real name street. I didn't write this little description. Place names of 501 Filomeno. Might not the old adage go, home is where your stuff is? I don't like that. I haven't read this essay in years. I wonder if it's actually good. Greg Martin, my advisor, I swear, told me that he thought this, was it this one or my essay about my sister, Some Thoughts on Leanne? About one of these, he was like, this is the finest piece of writing that's ever come out of the department. And that, like, I'm still living on that compliment. I can't remember the specifics. Which one was he talking about? He might have been talking about Some Thoughts on Leanne, but he liked this one too. And it's pretty experimental. I mean, the form I'm copying here, some people call this kind of essay a hermit crab essay because it takes the form of something else that's not typically an essay. And that's fine. You know, like an anthology, I think, reprinted something of mine, Start Breaking My Heart, which took the form of liner notes. But I mean, for me, form could be a lot of things. A lot of it, when I say every chapter has a different form of my 60 chapter, 2-volume, giant maximalist work I've been working on for 15 years, book 1 of which will be done this year. I say that, I mean a lot of different things. You know, I mean, some of my forms I make up, some are like geometric. I have one chapter called Pentagram, and it's got 5 sections of 3, and the 3 sections, word counts correspond to the angles of a pentagram. And then the 5 geographic points that are the section titles correspond with the 5 points of a pentagram drawn on a map. That is the area that I traveled. And then there's a pentagram in the work that it's partly about. I love a 1-word title if you have a good one. That one was called Pentagram. This one is actually like very sad. It's got a lot of funny stuff in it too. See, here's the stock photo. What you like. Anyway, I was like, I have way better photos that are actually of the stuff described. They weren't interested. They wanted it abstracted further, I guess. Not the picture of the swing, but of the idea of a swing. Strange. Yeah, so I just named all the geographic features of the house and talked about them nonfiction style, totally nonfiction. Art log, and it's alphabetized. A barkless log covered in grooves made by insects, the art log sits beside a sunless mud hole on the edge of the backyard. Anodyne, age 5, and Hagen, age 3, play here, placing paper over the grooves and rubbing it with peeled crayons. Kids produce huge amounts of lovely, creative, inspiring art. No one has any idea at all what to do with it. Climbing tree, a silver-barked Siberian elm beside the northeast corner of the house. In the front yard, the climbing tree is just sturdy enough for Anodyne to climb up to about the height of the roof. It's a place only she can get to. She calls it my tree. Recently, she climbed to its top and tacked a piece of paper there with her name on it and a picture she had drawn of the ocean. Fairy cave. Just south of the house, just beyond the climbing tree, are 2 ragged forsythia bushes, their boughs an almost perfect arc over a shady, child-sized area. I don't use commas the same way I used to. Inside is a straw mat weighted down by rocks with ribbons and yarn figurines tied to twigs overhead. In the children's private cosmology, particularly in Anodyne's, this is the center of the fairy world, where almost all the fairies and angels and gnomes live. The idea for the fairy cave came to me when I noticed a rectangle of worn cardboard and several empty Red Bull cans and realized there was a lot of space in these bushes, enough apparently for even a creepy adult to hide. I pruned the space with clippers to make it wider. Kayla and the kids decorated it. And then I mixed historical stuff through it that's relevant, you know. I was thinking of like a bunch of different levels when I wrote this. I kept zooming in and out and trying to check all the boxes I was thinking about in all these different levels. So yeah, place names books. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that when the memory of this one has grown faint, or whenever. Okay, back to Lake Powell books. Sorry about that, folks. What just happened? First through Grand Canyon, everyone's all clamoring, show us the Lake Powell books. I was like, no, I'm going to talk about place name books. But those, I mean, obviously the Utah and Arizona ones are relevant because that's the 2 states Lake Powell is in. A great read and a fine addition to Arizona history. The secret journals and letters to the 1869 crew who explored the Green and Colorado rivers. Cool. I've read John Wesley Powell's book a couple of times at least, a few times probably, The Exploration of the Colorado River and its Canyons. And I've read Edward Dolnick's Down the Great Unknown. That's a great book about that expedition. Both, really. The second expedition did not end well for some of the people. Some of the crew mutinied and walked away, and then were either killed by Native Americans or killed by people for being suspected of being federal agents hunting out perpetrators of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which I kind of think is more likely. A letter was found in this small Utah town in an old trunk that really pushes that story, and it's pretty convincing. The only people who really substantiated the that whole Native Americans killing those people's story were Mormons. So, like, Jacob Hamlin was this famous Mormon interpreter, and he interpreted a Paiute conversation and said, yeah, they say that they did it. But he would be CYA-ing, you know. Really, I think the first person down the Grand Canyon, and so the Grand Canyon is, yeah, okay, this is his first to Grand Canyon. This is here because it's Powell. Powell is very important to Glen Canyon, too. Glen Canyon was often called the Grand Canyon's lovelier sibling, like lower, you know, gentler walls. Still some pretty dramatic stuff, but not the Grand Canyon's Mile Deep is. And more like softened, formerly underwater swells and whirls and wave-like structures. Grand Canyon's a bit harsher, blockier, more severe. Okay, oh, all right, let's make this a half-hour video then, because this is my favorite book about Glen Canyon, probably. And Lake Powell. This book is great. If you ever research this subject, and if there's only one book that you read on Glen Canyon and the damming of it and Lake Powell, this is a great choice. I really love this book. I've read it a few different times in like different times of my life. It is powerful nonfiction, and I've camped right beneath that. That's so funny. I like, that's Boundary Butte, I think, on the border of Arizona and Utah. Yep. Seeing how things. But Jared Farmer, he and I corresponded a little bit. We wrote some letters back when in the early, oh, it was a long time ago. Wow. Yeah, nice guy. He's a good historian. This is a great book. This is a good book. Love it. This just tells like the big socio-political history surrounding it all and the environmental costs, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there. It's a great book. Glen Canyon Damned. What a good title, too. I probably would have put an N in there, spelled it that way. But I guess that's fine. Inventing Lake Powell in the Canyon Country. Yeah. This is a great book. This is like, oh yeah. Got this at UNM bookstore, I think. I do hate the black marks, but at least it's just on the bottom. To Dado from Sonora. I love you, Dado. You are the best dad ever. I wish you never died, because then you could be with me forever. I love you. Dado from Willow. Clap, clap, clap. This must be when Willow was really little. I love Cora. Well, I gotta keep that. That is a truly strange business card. Senseless Devices, division of Black Arroyo Labs. Electronics, kits, and more. Senseless Devices. Okay, this is definitely the beginning of a movie. If I even go to this website, a chain of events will begin. Just finding this card has damned me to it. This ends in a Terminator movie, I just know it. Let's see, what do I remember from this book? Well, there's a lot of, it's a well-told story. He's kind of like the Mike Davis of this area. And Glen Canyon is hugely important. It was arguably, the damming of Glen Canyon was arguably the beginning of the American modern environmental movement. It was like the big story for a long time. In Albuquerque, we kind of had a little local equivalent of that. They were going to put a road called Skyline Drive directly across the face of the mountains overlooking the town. It would have been the easternmost road, and it would have been like an amazing view, I'm sure. I've thought that before, because now parts of it are trail. But people in town actually rose up about it. They cared about the mountains and wanted to keep it preserved. It always gets chipped away, but yeah. So, yeah, they did a bunch of bulldozing, but it stopped. And then it was turned into trails, the Faulty Trail and the Skyline Trail. Anyway, digressions. That's a good photo. Yeah, Lake Powell is just such a surreal looking place. Oh, look, John McPhee liked this book. Farmer is a soulmate. Oh, Farmer is a soulmate of John McPhee. Oh, that's cool. High praise. I think he's a soulmate of Mike Davis. I mean, like, this just feels fiery and, like, so interesting. You know, you can't, like, engage with the world of the canyon country with a lack of awareness after reading a book like this. Beautiful wraparound cover and spine, except not on the back. That's too bad. They faltered. They had this great photo and they had to use it. I would have mirrored it or something. I don't know. I would have done something. What if you just had the colors extending out from there? That would be kind of interesting. It's a great compromise. So like blue, white, brownish. I used to call this bright brown. I was like, that's interesting. I've never thought about bright brown before. Oh, this is really... Have I ever read this? Yeah, I've read it. It's definitely dated language. This is an old book. Robert Brewster Stanton, Colorado River Controversies. I love this copy. Look at that thing. That's an interesting way to do the back cover. Oh, it doesn't. It's not the whole cover, though. Oh. Interesting. So there's this... For further authentic information, see Colorado River Controversies, obtainable from university libraries. Yeah, it's always been obscure. Of the many thousand Colorado River runners who traverse the Grand Canyon, only a handful visit this plaque marking the point where the Powell party split. If you were still ever locate a copy of the mysterious Colorado River Controversies mentioned in bronze on the canyon wall. For the first time since 1932, this edition makes available one of the classics of river history. Well, Stanton was interesting because he was like an entrepreneur and he wanted to make money getting gold out of Glen Canyon. And the crazy thing about Glen Canyon is that it was really full of gold that washed down from everywhere, from the snowmelt of the mountains that filled the river. And but it was like super, super fine. And it was like flour, and it was impossible to get out of the water. And so there's so many failed ventures, and some of them have this guy's name on them. For instance, he really thought like steamboats were going to be the thing on the Colorado River. They just were going to have to be like made navigable. And he put one together, and then it was left in ruins because you can't have a steamboat on the Colorado River. It's an insane river. It does not work. I remember checking this out from NMSU's library. Let's see some of the images. Now I have a copy, and it survived the purge. Because, yeah, this is an important resource on this topic, and it's a beautiful book. I love this. It feels like a 70s zine or something. Or a Bible tract or something that woodcut there. I don't know. It's just a great look. Oh, Down the Great Unknown. I mentioned this. This is great. This is the Powell expeditions as a real narrative, particularly the first one, I think. And it's so well written and so interesting. It has some digressions, but the digressions are super interesting too. Like, Powell was a one-armed man that sat on a tower in the middle of one of the boats and navigated. And they used wooden boats, which is a really dangerous way to go down. This was after the Civil War, and Powell had lost his arm in the Battle of Shiloh. And there's a whole chapter on the Battle of Shiloh in here. So, like, that's the kind of digressions I'm talking about. But they inform the story, and it's great. I remember watching the IMAX movie about that expedition at the Grand Canyon at the Visitor Center so many times as a little kid. Just really loving that story. Maybe that's one place the love of Southwestern history began. What did I write in here? Oh, I was taking notes when I was working on my book and on that long chapter. I said in a previous video, but my writing school in the early 2000s was writing a book about that long canoe trip I took around Lake Powell. And it never got published, but I've since used it as the basis for a heavy abridgment and rewriting of a chapter of book one of my book. And it's like a whole new thing now, but it definitely draws from that. Yeah, there's a chapter of my book you could say I've been working on since 1999. A 200-page chapter. That's nuts. And I do have a chapter that is my 11-year-old journals from when I was 11 revised. So you could say I've been working on that chapter since then. But the Lake Powell one really, so it's a pretty good looking book. I like it. I feel like maybe the design motif falters on the back, but it still looks good and the colors match. And here it is. This is the original Colorado River account. Though I do believe Josh White was swept downstream before John Wesley Powell, because he was able to name a lot of spots that he wouldn't have recognized otherwise. His granddaughter's or great-granddaughter's book about him is very compelling. And but he was like, supposedly this guy Josh White was he was in a group of miners, and they all started getting shot by arrows, attacked by some native people in the area. I don't know if that was in or out of character at the time, the people in that area. And so all his friends or coworkers were shot and killed. And so he jumped on this raft that they had and just rode the Colorado River down the most dangerous parts. And people were really afraid of the Colorado at first. No one had ever gone the whole length and like documented it because it's got Class 5 rapids at so many parts. It was theorized that it went underground because the only thing that ever showed up downstream was like splintered remains. Everything had been pureed. Anyway, this is kind of an interesting book because Powell does this thing like that 1980s space documentary, For All Mankind, that shuffles a bunch of Apollo missions together in a sort of visual collage, telling a single story with beats from a few stories. And he does that with the 2 expeditions. He kind of just mushes them all together into one expedition. So it's kind of confusing if you want to get the history out of it, because that's not historical. What are you doing, man? This book is good for sorting all that out. I really appreciated this book for like just helping me see it more clearly, because but Powell's a good writer, and there's so many interesting things in this book. For instance, the Escalante Dominguez expedition of 1776 had passed through the region and told Bible stories left and right. And when Powell came through in like, what is this, the 1860s, 1870s? 69 is when they started. When Powell came through, those same stories had mutated and like played a generational game of telephone for, almost a century. And like the story of Moses was transformed into a story of somebody that took off different masks. And so like Aaron was one mask and Moses was another. So interesting. Oh, it looks like I bought this at Haight Marina. That's crazy. Haight Village Store, Bullfrog Resort and Marina, Bullfrog, Utah. Oh. Well, that's confusing. Haight and Bullfrog are different places. But I guess they call it Haight Village Store. Maybe it's because it's near where the old town of Haight that was under Lake Powell was. I bet that must be it. They're keeping that village store name alive. But most of Haight was underwater. Cass Haight was a guy from Kansas who played the violin and came out and mined and homesteaded and did all kinds of stuff. He used to brag that he was one of Quantrell's Riders, this really violent Confederate group, but he totally wasn't. I researched that claim a bunch. Quantrell's Raiders. But yeah, the town of Haight and the town of White City were both submerged beneath Lake Powell. Yeah, Powell's book's got the old woodcuts. Powell's a very likable and interesting face mind to hang out with. He reminds me of Darwin. But he goes in like a geological direction. He's a good one. This book's great. I got a lot out of this. I still remember buying it at Borders forever ago. Wow, there's a really marked up section in here. Oh, that's North Gulch right there. I camped right by there. That was my first night of my trip. I camped beneath that. Recited poetry to the canyon. Haha, what a nerd. And then toward the end of my trip, I was in Cataract Canyon and went around Mill Crag Bend. Those are farther north stretches of the Colorado, north of Glen Canyon. Ruins on the brink of Glen Canyon. Yeah, a lot of really cool historical remnants were ruined by water covering them. Like the inscriptions at the 1776 crossing of the Fathers where Dominguez and Escalante crossed. This is down toward the dam. I wonder if you could still scuba dive and see it, if it's even there. Apparently it's much exaggerated. I've seen a picture of what it looked like in Ghosts of Glen Canyon. Yeah, not even. That's a fanciful drawing. Though there are rocks like that, often called chimney rock when they look like that. But it is a strange country. Yeah, this book's good. Love it. You gotta read adventure books and historical adventure books. I don't know. They're cool. Why not? You don't have to do anything. Just live your best life, whatever. But you'll benefit from it and go out and see these places if you can, or other cool places. I don't know. I love there's something special about the West. I feel drawn to it like the characters in Close Encounters of the Third Kind are drawn to Devil's Tower, Wyoming. That's how I feel about the Colorado Plateau. And this mountain in northern New Mexico, San Antonio Mountain. What's up with that thing? It calls me. So does Sierra Ladrones a little bit. But San Antonio, even more so. This is a cool book. It's an anthology of relevant pieces of writing from the history of Glen Canyon and the resistance to the dam. Like Clear Creek, that first chapter would probably describe the cathedral in the desert, this amazing room with the high waterfall in it that had great acoustics. Excerpt from the Dominguez Escalante Journal. Yeah, so in 1776, two priests, Dominguez and Escalante, set out from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Monterey, California to find an alternate route there. They failed, but they, in their trip, made a 6.5 month long, 2,000 mile loop. Get this, that's what my trip was. I did a 6.5 month, 2,000 mile long loop around Lake Powell. That parallel freaks me out. Who's writing this stuff? Anyway, so they were considered a failure by the church and given horrible jobs and, died, too soon or whatever. But they explored more undocumented by Europeans land than Davy Crockett, that other guy, Daniel Boone, Lewis and Clark. I mean, they saw a lot, and they took great notes. And I have another book on them we'll encounter. Here's an excerpt from John Wesley Powell's book we were just looking at. Frederick Dallenbaugh, he was on Powell's trip, and he wrote a book called The Canyon Voyage about that. Trips. He was one of Powell's men. Nanazash by Zangrade. Nanazash is the Navajo word for Rainbow Bridge. And I think it means, beats me, I can't remember. Probably giant rainbow rock or something. Barry Goldwater, a Republican in his time, would probably be considered like a liberal centrist now or something. There's that Bob Dylan there. If you think I'd let Barry Goldwater move in here and marry my daughter, you're crazy. Charles Eggert, Forbidden Passage. That's just like a piece of erotica they threw in here. I thought that was weird. Kidding. Let's see. Visit to a Drowning Canyon. Salvage Seasons. Oh, by Russell Martin. That must be from A Story That Stands Like a Dam. His very good book-length work about the building of the dam. Excerpt from All My Rivers Are Gone by Katie Lee. She was a river runner in Glen Canyon and one of the angriest people about the dam. And so she wrote a lot about that. And her voice is valid on it all. That's what happens. That's what it looks like when I'm filming and my nose itches. Excerpt from Encounters with the Archdruid. We already looked at that one. That's John McPhee's book. Kind of Sheila Heti style, he contrives this experience of, I'm going to have David Brower, head of the Sierra Club, and Floyd Dominy of the Bureau of Reclamation, who named and signed into being Lake Powell, go on a river trip together down the remaining miles of Glen Canyon. It was just Glen Canyon before the dam had filled it up. I can't remember. It's been a while since I read that one. I think it was below the dam. Oh, and then here's Floyd Dominy's like propaganda, basically. Lake Powell, Jewel of Colorado. I mean, he makes some points, but still. Damnation of a Canyon, Everett Abbey. Glen Canyon, Submerse Us by Wallace Stegner. Huh. Excerpts from There Was a River. I've seen that book by Bruce Berger. I think that's more about the Colorado, yeah. Travels with Selden by Ellen Malloy. You know, the buzz was she was going to be like the next Everett Abbey. I think she wrote that book about turquoise. Yeah, The Anthropology of Turquoise by Ellen Malloy. Reflections on Desert, Sea, Stone, and Sky. Have not read this. Bought this recently, new. I want to read it. I like all kinds of books, is what I'm telling you. Ann Weiler Walker, she writes a lot about the Escalante River, which I now have a special relationship. Kind of always have. David Brower, head of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club did a lot of really influential, important books. Oh, and Jared Farmer, Glen Canyon and the Persistence of Wilderness. He wrote that wonderful Glen Canyon Damned. I was lucky enough to briefly befriend Jared Farmer while at Missoula. I gave him a ride once from Provo to Montana, and he returned the favor by letting me ride on his expertise when I first became interested in Glen Canyon. His help, no doubt, saved me countless hours in the library stacks. Edited by Matthew Barry Gross. Camped on many beaches like this on that trip. But sometimes there weren't beaches. Sometimes it was just miles of cliffs that became very dangerous sometimes. I have some crazy stories from that time. And I wrote about them in my book. And hopefully that'll be published sooner rather than later. My goal is to finish this year. I need to get the oral history chapter back going. I got a little demoralized when someone kept dodging me for an interview. One time I was canoeing along this was in the first third of my trip, this really long sandstone cliff coming right down to the water. You know, Lake Powell's a flooded reservoir, right? I was out on the main channel, so like above the ghosts of the Colorado, and it was a crazy storm, and I needed to pull over like ASAP, and it was literally like a mile across the lake, you know, like from one side to the other in this area, quite wide and sprawling. The main channel is its own thing. That's where you can see the buoys. There's 180 buoys, or there were, marking the whole length of it, and I was always either counting down or counting up the buoys, aware of them. Rangers who maintained the buoys became my friends that I would see every so often. Pat and Bob. I gave them my canoe at the end of the trip. And they let it sit in a yard for like 5 years, and I found it on a subsequent trip back, and I was like, what the heck, you guys never used it? And they're like, oh yeah, we always meant to fix that up. So then they gave it back to me, and then I gave it to my friend Dave Zander, and then he sold it. That's the story of that. Yeah, but did you have to tell it? University of Arizona Press, that's another good publisher for college, like a good college press. Anyway, so I like needed to stop during the storm. It was all crazy. And I totally couldn't. So I'm like, I'm just going to like go across this lake here. And because I could see this area that looked like it was sloping down on the other side. And I like bashed my way over to it. Must have been up around here. Or maybe here. Yeah, here you kind of get a sense of like how wide it felt where I was at that time. This is not exactly where it was, but it was a similar feeling. Anyway, so I'm like, I'm going to cross over to this sloping shore on the other side. And the water was getting so crazy. It was so crazy. And the waves were so all over the place and squirrely that I really didn't have time to put on my life jacket, which I didn't usually wear. I just usually put it on if the water got rough. Like, I just didn't want to always have it on, you know? Like, in the summer, it got really hot, too. This wasn't in the summer. This was toward the beginning of my trip. And, which I started in November. But, I didn't have time to put my life jacket on, which like increased the stakes of it all. And I was like bashing my way across, and it was so wild. Or at one point, a helicopter flew overhead with like what looked like a camera. It was like, is this a news thing? But it turns out they were like counting wild rams. I heard later. Anyway, I finally made it over to the other side, and this slick rock slope, sedimentary rock, sandstone, came down to like 5 feet above the water. It was not anywhere close enough for me to get onto it. So I just kept canoeing along it, but I was like literally running out of strength. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so worn out. I had just been paddling and trying not to get turned into the trough of the waves the whole way over there. And like I paddled, and I mean, I just kept going, and then like the canoe kept getting cracked against the rock, and I knew it was going to like crack open. And like I literally just like gave up after a long while. I was like, I can't. I put my head in my hands, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to drown. I'm going to die. I felt like pretty resigned to death. And then like suddenly like a freaking miracle happened. Like a giant wave came up underneath the canoe and set the canoe on top of the rock. And I was just like suddenly fine. It was crazy. It's top 5 craziest things that ever happened to me in my gosh darn life. It was like the universe said, no, we want you in the game still. This isn't going to be what takes you out. Probably much more embarrassing and like in a stadium or something somehow. You'll fall down all the stairs. And your walker buckles or something. And the paramedics team will carry you back up the stairs in a stretcher, and you'll fall out of the stretcher, and that'll be the time that it kills you. The whole thing will be televised on the Jumbotron and international media. Not here, not on this lake. It was crazy. And you know what else was crazy? When I got on shore, there was an unopened can of beer just sitting on the shore. It's crazy. So I sat down, had a beer, and was alive. It was incredible. And then it was stuck there, windswept for at least a couple days, trying all my stuff out. I think I was happy to stop. You know, at this point, yeah, no one's watching, but I might as well finish this pile. Colorado hiking guide to the Colorado, something. What time is it? It's going to be like the middle of the night. Canyon Hiking Guide to the Colorado Plateau, 4th edition. Oh yeah, I went to this really cool event tonight. It was short films made by students at the high school I was at in this one film class. It was night 1 of 2. I'm going to a 2-night high school film festival. And I gotta say I'm invested. It was really good tonight. I mean, you know, they're student films, but I saw glimmers of brilliance throughout it all. There were a couple that were like, this one's great, just send it to a festival. Anyway, the Colorado Plateau, what a thing. Giant sandstone shelf of rock. Can't talk about a place like Lake Powell without talking about where it is. Colorado Plateau. Okay, this book I need to reread now because I recently walked the Escalante River when I was working at that summer camp this last summer. What am I going to do? Am I going to take that job again this summer? I got to figure my life out. Because I have to start this alternative licensure program, whenever that is. Maybe I'll just take the Cottonwood Gulch job in the meanwhile and stop it early if I have to. Tell them that's coming. I have to do the teacher training thing. I got to change my life. I need that sweet, sweet cheddar so I can start gambling and stuff. My patron saints are Dostoevsky and Bukowski. Must honor them. Anyway, so we walked this canyon that walked through a really deep sandstone defile, deep canyon called Death Hollow Canyon. And it was a tributary of the Escalante River, named after that priest from the 1776 expedition, named by one of John Wesley Powell's men. Anyway, this is a whole book about walking the Escalante River. It's a very shallow river. I saw so many beautiful things on it. Strange birds, an adolescent vulture in the weeds, snakes that moved just like the king of the snakes in Eudora Welty's short story, The Wide Net, just with their head held high, moving down the river, fish skittering away. I hope I kept a good journal for that time. I did, and I already wrote about that time. It was amazing. Three staffers and 13 trekkers, teenage trekkers, and we're all lost in the wilds of Utah. But yeah, walking the Escalante River was amazing. And at one point we walked by an ancestral Puebloan house, and I swear I could see a Nemo carved into it up in the side up there. I think it was one of them that Everett Ruiz carved his name into before he disappeared in 1934. And then in this stack of books about Glen Canyon and Lake Powell, we have this one. And this really is a key text for understanding the West and water in the West. If you've never heard the phrase, rain follows the plow, that's the dishonest phrase that was used to sell people unprofitable farmland out in the West that they would have to manage completely differently, but the people weren't prepared to manage differently. Rain follows the plow. All you got to do is plow it up, and the moisture from the soil will seed the clouds, and you'll get rain, and it'll change the land. I've seen it happen everywhere. It was a real common propaganda slogan back in the day. John Wesley Powell once had a bet with one of his friends about whose brain was heavier, and when they died, their brains were weighed, and John Wesley Powell won the bet. It's just one of the many fun facts you can find in this book. That one's in a footnote. Guess I drew sunglasses on this guy once. Here's a sticker from a pair of bootcut pants. Why did I put that on there? I must have. Or someone did. Oh, this thing is marked up. Yeah, I've read this for research purposes more than once. Powell possessed that combination of physical energy, social standing, mental scope, and training, wit, geniality, and science that seems superlatively American and irresistibly strong. But in the meantime, it must have been some satisfaction to provide ideas for the nation's great men and play politics for stakes. Prismo, where have you been? What's up, kitty? How you doing? This is not a scratching post. You can't scratch this one. Hey, kitty. Psst, psst. Hey, what's up? What have you been doing? How's it going? No, this is not a scratching post. Don't scratch this one. I'm going to have to get it reupholstered. Reupholstered anyway, thanks to you. What do you think of Glen Canyon and Lake Powell? And about the books, the literature. There's a lot of literature about it. To me, Glen Canyon and Lake Powell, I sometimes say this in New Mexico too, but it's really true of Glen Canyon and Lake Powell. It's the ultimate it's a cultic milieu. I think New Mexico might be the ultimate cultic milieu, but Lake Powell is definitely one. The idea of the cultic milieu is something that 1960s sociologists talk about. I've mentioned it before because I love it. It's a very useful idea. It's just the idea that when everything is pushed to the side, it eventually forms a new center, and those elements mingle and cross-pollinate and influence each other. Think about Charles Manson having Buddhist and racist and Christian and Nostradamus and all this like different stuff mixed together in his teachings. Or the Om Shinrikyo death cult. They were all about mixing Nostradamus and the Bible and UFO stuff and whatever. Heaven's Gate did the same thing. The cultic milieu is a phenomenon. But, you know, when things get pushed to the side, they start to form a new center. They start to mix. They start to influence each other. How did such a far out place as Glen Canyon become so huge, you know? It's part of the same riverway that the Grand Canyon is part of. It's remote, stony country. Oh, Prismo was crazy shedding. Yeah, you're getting hair all over my hand and face. The vocabularies collected by Lewis and Clark have been lost and not replaced. Powell knew 3 Shoshonean dialects, Ute, Paiute, and Hopi. And he had nearly 700 vocabularies that he and Professor Henry had taken. This is a good book. Bought this at a marina toward the very end of my trip, and Hype Marina, RIP. And read it all over Cataract Canyon, Millcrag Bend, Narrow Canyon, by Fires. Oh, I bet I wrote in this about, I used to do this thing, hold on. Nope, but I'm surprised. I used to always write in the back of books, like a little bit about my experience reading it. I think I wrote about it in my journal instead. Okay, let's look at a couple more books so this video can be a full hour. Because I'm a sadist. Hiking the Escalante. The Escalante River is incredible. So, out of all the areas of Lake Powell that I paddled, I thought the Escalante River was the most beautiful. I couldn't believe it. I fell in love with some of those canyons. Clear Creek Canyon was so narrow that I had to canoe in just by pulling myself forward with my hands, touching the walls on both sides, and then the canoe got stuck at the end, where there was a little waterfall just a few feet above me. And that was the top of the cathedral in the desert, this famous old music room, alcove, secret Glen, natural cathedral. And then I had to push myself out backward to get out. It was amazing. Sometimes I'd go into a slot canyon like that and bats would come out and it'd be dusk. And I had these really dark cherry red sunglasses that like totally made everything beautiful all the time, nonstop. Like I literally had rose colored glasses. And I remember it just being so amazing at dusk. The only time I've ever had prescription sunglasses, those things were great. Yeah, like I said, recently hiked the Escalante. This is a newish book. Where did I pick this one up? I think I got this at a bookstore. Escalante's Dream on the Trail of the Spanish Discovery of the Southwest. David Roberts is so good. He wrote an article for National Geographic Adventure about Lake Canyon and the Kaparwitz Plateau. And I went out and found all the things in that article during a time of a lot of travel. But when I was married but didn't have kids, met the people that he mentioned in the article, went to all the places, the arches. It was a really cool way to explore a piece of writing. And then he later thought he found the fate of Everett Ruiz. He found these bones, and the FBI really fumbled the investigation and like contaminated the scene when they came. But they said the DNA didn't match. So it fell apart after a National Geographic Adventure cover. I should find that for this video. It's in my closet. Anyway, David Roberts is a great writer. He has a good memoir, too. He was like John Krakauer's mentor. Oh, and he wrote a great book about the Pueblo Revolt called The Pueblo Revolt. That is a Western story everyone should know, and it's also an amazing tale. I mean, all the native people in New Mexico rose up. Not all the Puebloan people rose up and drove out the Spanish. It was incredible. David Roberts is great. I'd like to meet him sometime. And I did enjoy his very climbing-filled memoir. It was very interesting. Prismo loves it. She's a big David Roberts fan. She actually heads his fan club here in Albuquerque. She's always doing mailers and stuff. It's cool. She does that for a few writers, though, so don't let it go to your head, David Roberts. She also has one for Nicholas Sparks, so I don't even know if you want to feel honored or anything. But sorry, Prismo. Well, folks, this has been Books About Lake Powell with a bunch of digressions. Books about Glen Canyon. Oh yeah, and there was a little side story about place names books. Don't worry, we've still got all these to look at. By the time they're all reviewed, there'll probably be a few hours of Lake Powell, Glen Canyon books. But you know what? Some people like this topic. And if you're into this topic, you might want to know about the existence of some of these books. If you're not, you might want to just add to your knowledge. Here's some stuff I've heard and everything, whatever. I don't know. Why does anyone watch any of these videos? But why does anyone do anything? I watch some of the craziest videos sometimes. It's like Lost Media Mystery. It's like an ad that was on MTV once. Who cares? But you know, once you really internalize the great idea that there's only one story and it's the story of everything and not one piece is optional, you know, then everything's interesting to you. As Nietzsche said, when an intelligent person learns something new, it should immediately take its place as a link in a chain. I feel like that's true. It's all connected, man. And also, maybe you weren't hip to this rad place called the Colorado Plateau and the things upon it. Lake Powell and Glen Canyon is a part of that. And it's a very interesting, wild history, and it's tied up with so many big topics. Colonization, etc. Nature, some third thing. All right, folks. From a Lake Powell in the distant past. Out.